I know I sound a little bit weird. I'm just getting over a cough/cold, so I know I'm going to sound a little bit off, and if my voice cracks during anything, I guess just consider it comic relief. So of course I have all these ideas for videos that I'd like to do, but very little time considering that I have work now, so it's been a very fine balance. But one of the videos that I've been really wanting to do is to relaunch a book project. Some of you may or may not recall there was this book project. I'll get into that in a minute, but something that brought my attention to the forefront, or brought this book rather to the forefront of my attention, was an issue being brought to my attention. Not so much an issue, more of a kale and what the fuck smoothie being blended in real time on social media, in which I was tagged in. So those of you who are familiar with my channel, and even just close friends, knowing how devoted I am to the history and the endurance of our scene and the preservation of such, they just love to tag me in issues or just explosions that are going on, or discussions that they know that I would be interested in. And I think some of them are a little interested to see if I will have any input and what that input will be, because I tend to be a little bit explosive sometimes. But for the most part, I really like to pick my battles. This one I had a bit of a stake in because it's something that hit close to home for me. And the Gothic Border Patrol was out in full force. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not one of those people that are a fan of the trigger-happy folk that are so quick to cry foul the second somebody sneezes and it sounds like the word Bauhaus. Bauhaus! Even people who are openly opinionated to the point of outright snobbery, I would just consider them pretentious. But to somebody who was new to the scene, they'd have been put off and felt very confronted by such a display. I'm an adult. I have bared the brunt and witnessed my share of shitty behavior, but I could tell you with absolute certainty that as a baby bat, I would be in full-on abort mission mode in 0.5 seconds and would have thrown my hands up and said, that's it. Goth is not for me. Goths are mean. And that's a tragedy, because somebody would have been pushed away. To those of you who have been with me for a while, you might remember this book. It was a video I did regarding Mick Mercer, Hex Files, Goth Bible. And the whole point of it was, I send you the book, you slip something personal or sentimental within its pages, it could be a club pass, really anything, and then you send it on. The point really was to have you relate to something physical, give you a real look about what Goth was like more than 20 years ago, and to connect to other Goths. However, the book project was put on hold for nearly a year because its first recipient decided to hold on to the book and then stop answering all correspondence, but was online begging for weed money. So, long and short of it, I had to PayPal her the money to get the book back to me. And now I have it again. The reason that I chose this book for my project is that it helped me immensely, and it came out during a time where Goth had very, very little presence on the internet with regards to music, people, and where to go. So the release of this book was great, I mean, as a young teenager, because it put me in touch with so many aspects of the subculture that I didn't even know existed in my own city, as well as introduced me to new music. What was even more intriguing to me is that it showed me the worldwide influence of the goth scene, because as I knew it, it was basically US, UK, and Germany. It was everywhere. Goths in Africa, completely plausible nowadays, but to find that out at 16, it was mind-blowing. My world was opening up exponentially, and it was fascinating reading about and seeing photos of these Goths from every documented corner of the earth. Hex Files, the Goth Bible came out in 1996 when I was 16 years old and coming up in the goth scene in New York City and Long Island, a time when things were thriving. Now let's talk music, particularly industrial and EBM, the premise for the whole outcry that demanded we burn these books because those genres are featured within its pages of deception. During the time of the release of this book, our numbers were huge. We had massive venues, there were no shortage of concerts, we had record shops that had sections that catered to our genre of music. I'll give you an example. Bauhaus did a reunion tour in 1998 at Hammerstein Ballroom, a concert hall that holds 2,200 people. They did 2 nights in a row and they sold out both nights. Now, barring those who might have gotten tickets for both nights in a row, we'll call the number 3,900. And those are the ones that just happen to like Bauhaus. I'm sure you've heard people say, oh, Bauhaus is overrated. So as you know, they can be a bit of an acquired taste. So just in the state of New York, that's 3,900 people that showed up. So it's a pretty big scene. Here's a clip from that very show. I'm way up at the top, all the way to the left of the stage. God, I wish I was closer.
Stick around so you get to see Bauhaus.
Seeing Bauhaus for the first time. I can't believe this is happening.
Greatest band on the face of the earth. Enjoy it while you can, because we will never see their like again.
I always had in my mind they were never, ever going to play again. This is long overdue.
The reason that our numbers were so big and we had so much going on had a lot to do with the fact that goth and industrial were very much intertwined. Coming into it in 1994, it was just the way that things were, but looking at it objectively some 25 years later, I can definitely see why it worked so well. We went hand in hand because alone we really couldn't sustain, and as a standalone club, a goth night or an industrial night, it wouldn't work, but put the two together, suddenly we're having bigger venues, and we have bigger numbers, and the reason that the music worked so well together, because the industrial and EBM that you know today versus the industrial EBM of, I guess you would say, my era, it's very different. Back then, it was much, much darker, and it blended together so well. So you could see a girl that by today's standards, you would call a romantic goth, dancing to Wumpscut, but then you'll see a guy in combat boots and a chain belt dancing away to Sisters of Mercy. So opening up the book and seeing industrial and EBM within the book's pages, it didn't seem out of place or odd in any way. So the way we worked together is that sometimes we shared a dance floor and then other times we had different rooms. But one thing that remained constant is that there was no divide. Wumpscut girl, Sisters of Mercy guy, it didn't make a difference. We're all part of the same tribe. And a really great side effect of this is that we were exposed to a lot more music and it spread goth that much further. 3 concerts, The Cure, London After Midnight, and Skinny Puppy. 3 very different bands, but going to these shows, we would always see the usual suspects. However, today, you would see people looking into the crowd playing a game of spot the difference. I want to touch on some of these issues that have been brought about, and the reason that I want to touch on them is that I don't know how far these words have gotten, and I kind of want to have my say before they get out of hand. It takes a special kind of entitled, arrogant know-it-all to argue, dispute, and then dismiss historical fact and experiences from a person who actually lived the thing versus them who have not, solely because there is no proof in writing that they agree with to back it up. This wiki warrior mentality is something that needs to have its face set on fire. When I see people refer to books such as Hex Files, the Goth Bible, as a money-making scheme, which is rife with inaccuracies and spreading misinformation by people who were not there to experience life during the time of the book's release, it makes me roll my eyes so far into the back of my head I could see inside my own skull. This book is kind of like a goth Yellow Pages, and it depicts life as it was in the early to mid-90s. To lose your shit over a book that came out 22 years ago, claiming that it's going to confuse baby bats, you're missing the point entirely. This book is a relic frozen in time. The scene isn't what it was 22 years ago, and to assume that any new baby bat is going to believe that, you must think they're friggin' idiots. This book is filled with addresses and phone numbers, actual physical brick and mortar places of publications, societies, record labels, and stores that they don't exist anymore. And I hate to say it, but that mentality, that very mentality, is part of the problem. I know you think you're helping, but you're not. It's so hypocritical, but I'm not even sure that they realize it because they're so concerned about this misinformation causing these new baby bats to contaminate the purity of goth that they're being confronting and aggressive and just so focused on the science of it all, that it in of itself is a detriment to the subculture as a whole. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't shove his head under and force him to drink. It's taking something emotional, organic, romantic, and natural, and then turning it into like the scientific formula. Again, it's this need to take people and the varying components that make them who they are and shunt them into these labeled boxes. And then those who don't fit a certain criteria are then pushed out because the parameters that now goth kind of falls into have become so narrow. And segregation is just never the answer, ever. The internet is an amazing tool, and it's been incredibly useful to myself and tons of people, but unfortunately, one of the downfalls is that it can make a person drunk with power, given the right or wrong personality type. And what it does is it takes a person who thinks that they know it all without actually having done any of it or lived any of it. There's absolutely no shame in saying, I don't know, when you don't know something. It's actually a sign of intelligence and humility. This hand-holding mentality that's being fostered needs to stop, because you literally have people running around with no idea whether to shit or go sailing. All of these rules, subgenres, guidelines, goth versus gothic, being shoved down people's throats is confusing and overwhelming. And that right there is the very reason that I get so many comments from people describing themselves to me, curious as to whether or not they're goth. Because they genuinely don't know. The fact that they need someone else to tell them that is absolutely insane. When I was a kid coming up in the scene, like I said, resources were very limited, so what you knew, you worked hard to find. Randomly discovering a new goth shop on 8th Street after stopping into Gray's Papaya. Grabbing passes or flyers when you're entering or exiting any sort of alternative store, or reading the back of the Village Voice, which led you to the gothic clubs or the shows. No one told me who I was. I developed into the person I became based upon where my experiences led me. Physically led me. Downstairs in Generation Records to find the used goth industrial section. Upstairs to Coney Island High where I saw Alien Sex Fiend. This book didn't just help me, it helped a lot of people, and not because it told us who we are. No book, no blog, no Facebook post should ever tell you who you are. This book is not designed to tell you who you are. This book is designed to show you where to find us. And thus the journey begins. And that being said, let the relaunch begin. If you want this book, tell me in the comments below. Tell me you want the book, and remember, if you don't have the money to send the book out, please don't put your name in. I don't want to have another experience like last year. So comment below. Love you guys. Bye.